Hello and welcome to Dialogue. On the first day of the UN Climate Change Conference in Dubai, known as COP28, delegates agreed on the operationalization of the Loss and Damage Fund to help the world's poorest and most vulnerable countries hit by climate change. At the same time, the impacts of climate change are shaping the lives of over 370 million indigenous peoples around the world, which comprises less than 5% of the world's population, but protects some 80% of the planet's global biodiversity. What's the significance of the Loss and Damage Fund to go further in tackling the surging climate threat? How can we fairly evaluate the obligations of the developed world and the rights of the global South? With these questions and more in mind, in the first part, I'm joined by María Fernanda Espinosa, former president of the UN General Assembly. In the second half, I will talk to Ms. Hindou Oumarou Ibrahim, president of the Association for Indigenous Women and Peoples of Chad, about the story of her people and their cause in fighting climate change. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Welcome to Dialogue, Madame. First of all, I wonder, what do you make of the COP28? Some say this is the last opportunity for us to effectively tackle climate change. Do you agree or disagree with such an idea?
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you today, and it is true. I have been attending the COP in Dubai, and obviously the negotiation is not easy. There are many pending issues. Every study, every assessment, every report, the IPCC, the UNEP emissions gap report, basically they all say the same. We are off track in meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement. Only last year, the temperatures increased in 1.2%. This is leading us to a 3 degrees Celsius increase in temperature instead of a decrease. So we need to accelerate action, both on the mitigation and the adaptation front. We need to remain in the 1.5 degrees, as the Paris Agreement say. And basically 1.5 degrees is not a target. It is the top limit for humanity to continue to exist. So what the expectations of COP28 in Dubai are high. We are hoping to have the necessary resources, the necessary frameworks, the necessary ambition that is needed at this point, because we are not in a climate change moment. We are in a climate emergency moment. And the window of opportunity is closing. It's not that we have a decade ahead of us. We have the next 5 to 7 years to really curb emissions by 2030 in almost half, and by 2050 to become a net zero world. And of course, we know about the 2060 target that China has set for itself as well.
The neutrality 2060 for the China target. Well, you mentioned about ambition. The Paris Agreement, as you said, of 2015 set to limit the global average temperature increase to 1.5 degrees. But then, we, as we witnessed over the past years, the pandemic, the conflicts in different parts of the world, we do see there's now talk of raising that limit to 2 degrees or even 3 degrees Celsius. Some would say probably that's somehow a compromise forced upon us. As you said, do you see there's a lack of ambition, or somehow there's a timid response to the crisis we're facing?
Well, again, the issue of 1.5 is a scientific limit target. It's not, let's go to 2 degrees Celsius increase. It's not possible, because it means that the sea level will rise in a way that would basically wipe out many of the coastal countries and make communities suffer and lose billions in infrastructure and have massive displacement of people. And we decided in Cancun many years ago that the fund, the Green Climate Fund, would have $100 billion per year starting in 2020. The money is not there yet. And it's a symbolic number because we know, and recent studies have shown, that the developing countries need at least $2.4 trillion per year to meet their Paris Agreement commitments, both on the adaptation and the mitigation front. So I think that what is expected from COP28 is to be up to the task, to be as ambitious as the emergency, the climatic emergency requires. And for that, we need a very strong and bold global stocktake decision, because for the first time, we are in the midpoint of the Paris Agreement. We need to have a fully operational loss and damage fund that was established in Sharm el-Sheikh last year. So the operation of the fund was agreed already in COP28. There are pledges, initial pledges, or 400 million, but of course, it's still insufficient.
As you said, loss and damage fund, I think action implementation is important. I guess it's a good thing to see that, there are pledges and also real, the fund, of $700 million to this fund, loss and damage fund, for these most vulnerable countries in the developing world. And furthermore, we do see UAE, the host of COP28, has also launched this $30 billion climate-focused investment vehicle. What's your response to that? I mean, it's far from the $2.4 trillion needed to deal with the climate change, but it's some progress?
It is progress. It is progress. And we have to say that we have to understand there is a package of decisions that are negotiated in the framework of the UN Convention and the Conference of the Parties. So we expect a new target for adaptation, because we have one that is very clear for mitigation, which is the 1.5 degrees, which is the 20 gigatons that need to be deleted from the emission side so we can meet the Paris Agreement goals. But on the adaptation front, we don't have the numbers, we don't have the goals, we don't know exactly what needs to be done, and this is also going to come up, hopefully, out of COP28. And the other part is basically what you were mentioning, the presidential action agenda, the pledges, the declarations, the 30 billion, which is an important and meaningful amount of resources for developing countries. Whatever we say we're going to do needs to be tracked to make sure that at the end of the day, they are really delivered. The commitments are delivered. And the package of negotiations are still in the making, because the negotiation is still ongoing.
Mm-hmm. What has been, put under spotlight is really the end of the consumption of fossil fuel, or the transition to the renewables. The president of COP28, Al Jaber, made some controversial comments about phasing out fossil fuels. Basically, his idea is like it's unrealistic to phase out the fossil fuels in a certain period of time, and then there are some criticism. What do you make of these comments by the head of COP28? Some people would say probably, it's probably unrealistic to reduce to the point of zero of the consumption of the fossil energy here. But it's a task we need to accomplish. I mean, how do you balance, how do you achieve such a target at the same time? We know there is a mounting difficulty.
Well, we saw this debate happening since Glasgow. I think the world remembers that there were a group of countries basically asking for phasing down and not phasing out. But the science and the evidence we have right now really calls for urgently phasing out fossil fuels. And that's where we need to go, because emissions continue to increase in spite of all the commitments, in spite of the Paris Agreement, of 28 COPs, all the declarations we have signed, the national determined contributions, entire cities and entire countries devastated because of climate-related events, hundreds of millions of climate-related displaced persons. I was recently in Dubai with the High Commissioner on Refugees. The numbers of climate refugees are increasing steadily around the world. Food security is in risk. Water is in risk. So we need to act in a very ambitious, bold way. So I think that we should keep the phrase phasing out fossil fuels and have a plan to achieve that.
Mm-hmm. China is the largest contributor to the emissions. At the same time, China, of course, is the largest producer of goods around the world. At the same time, it's also in a leading position in terms of transitioning to renewables. If you look at the EVs, the solar panels, wind turbines, China in a position, I would say, of strength to export, and of course, not only transitioning inside domestically, but also probably helping other countries to achieve the goal of cutting emissions. So what kind of a role do you see for a country like China here?
Well, I think that China is one of the most important players in the climate discussion. Number one, because it's the first producer of renewable energies around the world, because it is a country that also has been able to reduce poverty levels at the same time as making a very strong and intentional investment in renewable energy and innovation. It is not only about producing renewable energy, but it is about energy efficiency and storage of energy, which is one of the critical issues. And I think that China is in the best position to support other countries to really share the technologies, the knowledge, the experience of their pathway to a renewable energy future, to a low carbon future. China is well placed to be a country that would be leading the charge on this energy transition that we're talking about, and doing so in company or in support of other developing countries. So it's a key player. And of course, in the equation of high emitting countries, China is a very important emitting country. So the efforts that China is doing right now, we have seen also with great hope and I would say satisfaction, the recent agreement on climate signed by the United States and China during the last visit of President Xi and President Biden. We see that climate change can unite peoples and countries. Even if the situation is difficult, it can be a bridge for good diplomacy, for cooperation and mutual understanding. Climate has been perhaps the issue that has united these two important countries in the current geopolitics.
Mm-hmm. Let's have a short break. We'll be back right after this. The impacts of climate change are shaping the lives of over 370 million indigenous peoples around the world, which comprises less than 5% of the world's population, but protects some 80% of the planet's global biodiversity. As the world leaders gather in Dubai for the 28th UN climate talks, indigenous representatives are calling for more drastic actions to protect our vital ecosystem. Among them is Ms. Hindou Oumarou Ibrahim, president of the Association for Indigenous Women and Peoples of Chad, who has been speaking out for her people with the hope to help them battle the climate crisis. Today, we are very honored to have Ms. Hindou Oumarou Ibrahim with us to tell the story of her people and their cause. Welcome to Dialogue, Ms. Ibrahim. To help our viewers better understand your views on climate change and indigenous peoples, I think it's important for them to learn where you come from. Could you share with us more about Chad, your country, and your life experience as an individual from the Bororo tribe?
Sure, thank you for the invitation. So my name is Hindou Oumarou Ibrahim. I am from Chad. I am from Bororo people who are indigenous peoples of Chad. So my people are nomadic pastoralists. We are cattle herders, so we follow the rain. When it's rain, we have the pastures, our cattle follow. So we can walk over years 1,000 of kilometers just after the rain and after the pastures. So my people live between Chad, Cameroon, Niger, Nigeria, Central African Republic, and even Sudan. So before the colonization, it used to be all our land. And now after the colonization, they cut us into the pieces, and then I found myself born in Chad, and that's the reason why I'm an indigenous Chadian woman.
Well, I guess, that is why important, the climate change is so important to your people because, for most of the people, if they follow the rain, to herd. So is that the case that climate change is becoming probably an increasingly important issue for your community?
Right, that's true. So climate change for my community, we are not reading it in a book or watching it in the TV. It is a daily reality of our people. We are seeing the rain change a lot. The season change. The rainy season last year come a big rain that flood everything, flood the crops, flood the home of the peoples, and we ended up with a food insecurity. And this year, we do not have enough of the rain, and it's going to be a drought. And when it is a drought, there is no pastures, it will be no crops, and of course, it will be ending up with the food insecurity. In addition, people are fighting each other to get access to the natural resources. Then it's become a conflict between the communities. And that is very sad because it gives an opportunity to a terrorist group to take a place because people are poor, and then they come invaded the place, they terrorize the peoples, and then it's become again another crisis. And at the end of the day, you have like man who can migrate, and then they leave the women and children alone at the community. So climate change is a reality that emphasizes all the social issues in my home country.
Obviously, in the fight against climate change, we know there's rising voices against the use or the reliance of fossil fuel. I know that apart from ending the reliance on fossil fuel, what other proposals will you do you bring to the table at COP28?
So for us, of course, the big problem of the climate is the fossil fuel. We have to phase out fossil fuel. There is no any excuse because the world developed a lot of renewable energy. You can find that even in my nomadic pastoralist community. For those who have a cell phone, you can have a small solar panel that they will move with it and they can charge their cell phone. So if the solar panel reach my community who is nomadic, very far from all the development, so we can have a solution. So we must end the fossil fuel, and the decision of the COP28 must have the phase out the fossil fuel. Secondly, we are all celebrating the funding for the loss and damage, but the governance of the loss and damage must include an indigenous people seat at the tables. Then we can take the decisions with them. We want to have the observer role, but the active observer role. Thirdly, on the mitigation, so mitigation and just transition. So just transition must be a reality, equitable for the peoples. Just transition cannot be the name of the greenwashing to extract all the mineral of all the biodiversity who are in the land of indigenous peoples and create another crisis. So it must be equitable, respect the rights, respect the land, and give those who do not have the power. And finally, we wanted to have a direct access finance. They talk about a lot of finance for nature, for health, for water in this COP. But all those finance going only to the government, it must go directly to the indigenous peoples that are implementing a real project on the ground to fight climate change.
Mm-hmm. But then, when it comes to this, you mentioned earlier, but basically, this is financial payment program from the global north to the global south when it comes to the loss and damage fund. This is a step forward, let's say, in mitigating the disasters from climate change. But you are saying that's not enough, right?
I think it's not enough. It is the first step. We have to do first step. And this is the first step, and it is the responsibility of developed world who must pay, because they are the one who use all the fossil fuel. They have the ecological debt of the global south. They have the ecological debt of the indigenous peoples. They must pay for that to repair the nature. We are not asking them a charity. We are not asking them that to give us money just like this. We are asking them to pay back the responsibility that they damage the land, and then we are losing all our life and livelihood. And it has to be simple. Why they cannot just do that if they are caring about the planet? Anyway, climate change is impacting us today, but it's going also to hit them, because climate change do not have any frontiers, do not respect any visa, do not respect any boundary, and don't need ticket to travel.
Well, you have met global leaders, recently, as well as at COP28. Do you think your message is well received by the, let's say, rich nations, leaders from the rich nations, like whether they are ready to do their job or to do their part to help deal with the consequences of climate change in the global south, in particular indigenous peoples?
So indigenous peoples have been participating on the climate negotiations since Rio. We are getting a small win, and we got some win in the Paris Agreement, 5 references on our knowledge, on our rights, and in our participations. That have been very important. And then here at the COP28, we come back to ask them with a same voice. They have to listen to what we are saying. They have to give us the space to sit in the tables and discuss with them. When they talk about all the climate issues, they're talking about our land, they're talking about our resources. It is our home. Did they listen? We are going to see that at the outcome of the COP28. I'm very, very looking forward to all what we are asking for: the permanency, the direct access finance, the just and renewable energy that can respect our rights, and to end the fossil fuel out. So those are the results we are waiting. We talk them, we ask them, and we will be holding them accountable. They must deliver at the outcome of this COP.
Mm-hmm. In previous interview, you said that many of your people have pinned their hope on you to speak out for them on the issue of climate change. This is a lot of responsibility, heavy responsibility, I would say. How do you feel taking up this challenge?
You are completely right. It is a big responsibility to speak on behalf of the people who do not know what I'm talking about when I say a COP. They do not know what is the Conference of the Party. They do not know all the UNFCCC, all the acronym that we are using here. All what they know if the rain didn't come, they are going to suffer. Or if the rain come a lot, they are going to suffer. That's the only thing that the people know in my community. So what I'm doing here is to come and give them justice, represent them, and go back home, tell them all the results. It is a very heavy responsibility. Sometimes I just go there and they're all happy. They surround me, they come around me. They're like, oh, you are going there, you are defending us. And when I know there is no direct access, finance, there is no fast solution to help them, it's more frustrating, heavy for me. Then I have to stand up and just like do it for them. And I will never give up to my community or to the indigenous communities around the world. I will be always standing up for them.
Well, speak of that, I wonder, in your opinion, or based on your experience, what are the greatest obstacles, in the way to achieve progress against climate change?
I think the global obstacle is there is no action on the ground that people are doing. There is more talks. There is little of action. Remember the 100 billions that have been adopted in Copenhagen. We are every year have to shout as all the non-state actors. The developing country have to ask for, and it have to be in the tables before that they reach the 100 billions. But now the climate disaster need 1,000 billions. It needs trillions of funding. That is a big obstacle. We cannot anymore accept the talks, the commitment, without the real action that is following. We do not have time. We are keeping telling them we are in urgency. We don't want to be in a non-reverse. When we reach the 1.5, in my community, we will be having more than 55 and 60 degrees Celsius, and we will be becoming all climate refugee. We will be losing our dignity, our land. Our people will not have any place, and this is not acceptable. Some people, indigenous peoples on the islands, they will lose completely their lands. There will be no one, and this is not acceptable. So it has to be an action, and action is lacking in all those climate discussions.
If I'm right, I think you were a college student, and then gradually you're becoming more active in your community in the fight against climate change. You bring people together to find ways, for example, for people to receive, alert or changes for weather forecasts. So tell us your stories. What makes you you are now?
So I get born as an indigenous woman. So I already get born as an activist. So in my community, when I see how they're struggling with the climate change issue, they are losing their land, they're losing their resources, and they have to fight every single day to get their rights, it's normal that I just stand up and fight for them. So when I start going to school as a young girl, I have been discriminated as an indigenous girl. And that also helped me to just stand up and fight for my right, fight for the right of the girl who have my age. And I understood I cannot talk about the human right without talking about the environment right, because we live and depend from the environment. If our environment and our human rights are not respected together, so we cannot fight climate change. And then I stand it up with my community and on behalf of my community and do what I do now. And as I told you, I don't have any other choice than to stand and fight for them.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Thank you for speaking with us. With that, we come to the end for today's discussion. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.